So we have another exciting day planned for you. We're going to get started with this morning with our morning panel plenary, and the title is the Future of Work panel. So I am thrilled to bring up Karen Marangel, the Assistant Director of EHR at the National Science Foundation, for welcome remarks for today.
Thank you, everyone. It is a true delight to be here with so many of you who are working on such important facets of STEM education in our colleges and universities. So kudos to all of you for all the work that you've been doing and all the work that you are continuing to do. I hear that last night Sarah gave an incredible talk. And I am so glad that you had the opportunity to hear her important messages. And I urge you, as we continue on in this symposium and in the work that you're doing back on your campuses, to keep her words in mind. So we're going to be taking you through in this panel in quite a different direction. It's important to stay grounded in the essence of who your students are. As I stated in my welcome letter for this symposium, this is truly an exciting time for the STEM program and the STEM community. You're exploring innovative ways to collaborate and to ensure that all members of our society are provided with opportunities to engage and pursue STEM disciplines. The theme of this year's symposium sets the stage for the collective work that will require the knowledge, expertise, and experience you each bring, and that theme being creating pathways to an inclusive STEM workforce. And I know that our director last night talked to you just about how important the STEM workforce is at NSF. So this is why I'm so thrilled about being here with all of you for a little bit today, and in particular for this panel on the future of work. One of the NSF 10 big ideas is the future of work at the human technology frontier. This big idea is a couple of years old, and already it has generated some pretty exciting results. I'm going to share a few of those with you. Through the future of work, the National Science Foundation encourages research communities to respond to challenges and opportunities in the changing landscape of jobs and work. The program supports convergent research within the domain of work to understand the advances of the human technology partnership, promote new technologies to augment human performance, illuminate the emerging socio-technological landscape, and understand the risks, benefits of new technologies, and to foster lifelong and pervasive learning with technology, which is becoming more and more and more important. Thinking critically about the interplay of human skill with pervasive, intelligent, and autonomous systems becomes increasingly important as we achieve advances in technology, and these advances impact all of the STEM disciplines. So you, the STEM community, are well positioned to enact curricular innovations, address rapidly changing technologies and perceptions, and to keep your eye on equity and inclusion as we forge into some of these new frontiers in the STEM workforce. As the agency thinks about 2026 and we plan for that future, there's many pressing questions that are ahead of us for fundamental science and emerging research, and included in those are questions about education. So improving and enhancing STEM education is critical to the economic well-being of the nation, we all know this, and innovation is a critical piece of an effective STEM education workforce of the future. There are several questions when we think about the future that must be considered, questions about skills, education, training, and education that will be required for future workers. Some of these questions are, what are we doing to ensure that we are ready to address the changing landscape of work that is here and on the horizon? What will undergraduates look like in 2026, in 2050? What education will they need? What will their learning environments be like? What are the skills that are most critical for the future of work, and who has a say in that? How can we successfully institute convergent education? How do we address teaching topics that cannot be adequately taught by teaching through the lens of a single discipline, such as data science? And how do we teach when we need multiple disciplines to address some of the key questions, or where you have humans and robots acting as teams? How will artificial intelligence and other technologies change the nature of work And how will they change the engagement of workers, both with people and with new emerging technologies? And this includes our own work, the work of teaching. As I mentioned, the Future of Work Big Idea at NSF has netted some very exciting projects, and I just want to quickly mention a couple of those. Michigan State University has a team from architecture, engineering, and construction management working on understanding how technology and people interact, distribute tasks, cooperate, and complement each other with the goal of augmenting human cognition with intelligent social networking to help navigate the complexities of working in multidisciplinary teams. And the point here is that the technologies are moving beyond just tools for humans, but they're augmenting the way that we think. At Arizona State University, there's a team working with K-12 teachers to develop cognitive tutors in the classroom that will use artificial intelligence to help harness the things that teachers know, the routines that work well, and help them be able to implement that in their classrooms for the betterment of their students. So from these very quick examples, the future of work at the human technology frontier is quite exciting, quite on the cutting edge, and it is having a profound impact on our daily lives. The future of work will provide us with effective, sustainable, and timely solutions to challenges in the working landscape. So thank you again for all of your efforts in STEM. I'm excited about this panel, and I look forward to continuing to engage with you in the exciting work that you're doing. Thank you.
Thanks, Karen, for your remarks. So next, I'd like to bring up Maureen Kearney, Chief Program Officer at AAAS, to give welcome remarks on behalf of AAAS.
Good morning, and welcome. Welcome to this inspiring STEM conference, and congratulations to all of you for working towards a goal that's so critical to the future of science. My name's Maureen Kearney. I'm the Chief Program Officer at AAAS, and I'm Director of the Office of Science, Policy, and Society Programs. In my role, I oversee most of the programmatic activities at AAAS, and these programs serve many of the higher-level goals of the organization, which include strengthening support for the scientific enterprise itself, fostering education in science and technology, strengthening and diversifying the workforce, promoting and defending the integrity of science and scientific freedom, enhancing communication among scientists and society, and providing a voice for science on pressing societal issues. So, for example, some of our current programs that we have right now include the Research Competitiveness Program, which builds capacity for STEM ecosystems through peer review, assessment, impact measurement, early career and entrepreneurship programs, etc. Our STEM education program, which develops high-quality STEM opportunities and resources for students, educators, families, and a scientifically literate public, teacher preparation materials, etc. The STEM Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion program, seeking to strengthen and diversify STEM career pathways that will lead to a strong and inclusive STEM workforce. Not just that, but this program also addresses diversity and inclusion issues throughout STEM, in academia, faculty retention, promotion, publishing, all the areas which diversity issues matter for. We also have our Science, Human Rights, and the Law program. The mission of that program is to foster and facilitate the responsible development and application of science and technology in the service of society. So it addresses ethical, legal, and human rights issues that are related to the conduct of science and to the application of science. We have a program called Dialogue on Science, Ethics, and Religion, which facilitates dialogue and engagement between scientific and faith communities. And we have a program called Science and Technology Policy Fellowships, which offers opportunities for scientists and engineers to participate and contribute to policymaking while also learning firsthand about the intersection between science and policy here in DC. In addition to those programs, we run a large number of convenings and workshops and trainings, and so taken as a whole, the programs at AAAS I sort of think of as from one end of strengthening science all the way to translating scientific knowledge into effective policy, sort of science for a better world. And so I say all this to say that you can see that the goals of your symposium fit squarely into that mission and vision. And in fact, I would say the goals of STEM are foundational to everything else. What's critical to building a healthy scientific enterprise that can contribute to solving problems and translate to public policy? A STEM workforce that cultivates talent and promotes the full inclusion of excellence across the entire social and economic spectrum. A STEM system that ensures that all people have the skills and opportunities to engage in and benefit from scientific advancement. And a STEM active culture that inspires people from all backgrounds to pursue career pathways in STEM. So this vision, sort of a science for everybody, science for all, that no one should be excluded, is also informed by an idea of science for all, but science by all, because the data show us that what science is done is affected by who's doing it. So until the STEM workforce itself is as diverse as our society is, will not necessarily be pursuing answers to the questions and challenges that affect all of us. So history and data show us this. So we have a lot of work to do in this respect, but this event and other activities should make us very hopeful. And as you know, these kinds of changes need to be systemic and structural, because the problems are systemic and structural. So moving beyond sort of the deficit model in the pipeline, but also all the way through. How do we, we need to recruit and we need to diversify the pipeline, but where does that pipeline lead? And how do we retain people and make the culture of science itself a place where everyone can participate? So I just wanted to give you an overview of some of the AAAS programmatic work to put this in context. And I welcome you to explore all of these efforts in our programs and to get involved. I see that we have a table of swag over there from some of our programs. So it's our good fortune that we have dedicated and talented staff who work to bring these sorts of events together. So congratulations to them. Thank you to them, to all the AAAS staff here, Iris, Betty, Janaea, Shirley, Neela, Jennifer, Yolanda, Laureen, Tarek, Allison, and everybody else. It's really an outstanding team. And thank you very much to NSF for continuing partnership with AAAS in these important efforts. So with that, welcome. I'd like to bring up and introduce your panel moderator. I'm looking forward to the next panel. Erin White. She will moderate the next panel session, The Future of Work and Workforce Development. And Erin White is Senior Director, Product Development and Research at STEM Connector, where she leads efforts to produce actionable insights for members in the field through research and analysis. Erin brings a breadth of experience working in the social sector with an emphasis on translating ideas to action and creating innovative partnerships between business, government, nonprofits, and foundations to tackle complex social problems. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Awesome. Well, it is a great pleasure to be with all of you today. I think this is the most packed I've ever seen this room for a conference, so I'm thrilled by the number of people who care so deeply about the topic of, improving opportunity for the lives of so many people through STEM education and career pathways. And I'm joined by a great panel today, and I'll go a little bit more, brag on them in a minute, but just a couple of notes on sort of to set a bit of a theme for our conversation about the future of work in STEM. STEM creates opportunity. Over the last 3 decades, we've seen STEM employment grow at a rate of about 80% over that time, relative to non-STEM employment, which has only grown about 30%. We know that of the S&P 100 companies, half of them are hiring for the same 37 jobs. The same 37 jobs, most of which you would recognize as STEM, or you would recognize the skill set required as a STEM skill set. We know that STEM isn't just in demand, it's not just an economic engine. We know that workers in STEM have a wage premium, They earn between 15 and 30% more than non-STEM workers. So we know this is a tremendous engine for economic mobility for individuals, families, and communities. So given that that's the case, it's still striking that only around 8% of associate's degrees each year and 19% of bachelor's degrees are awarded in STEM. Because that's where the opportunity gap starts to emerge. And it's interesting that then, of course, that we know that those numbers are even more troubling for students of color, for students from low-income communities. So certainly there's an opportunity in front of us, all those jobs. There's a challenge in front of us, all those degrees and all those students who are potentially being left out of that opportunity. And that's why the panel's coming together today, to bring perspectives from industry, from post-secondary education. And I was reviewing the bios this morning and I realized we have an engineer, an economist, and an MBA are going to talk to us about the future of work. So I think that's a pretty good combination. So I just want to introduce my panelists. So Ken Eisner is the Director of Worldwide Education Programs and the lead for AWS Educate at Amazon Web Services. Ken has over 20 years of experience in leading education technology initiatives to really close this gap between education and work. He created and launched AWS Educate, which is Amazon's global initiative to address the education and workforce linkage and to get both community college students, other post-secondary students, and K-12 students on pathways into the cloud workforce. It's reaching hundreds of thousands of students in over 2,400 institutions, including all of the top 10 leading global computer science institutions. And Ken also has a personal passion for this. He serves on the DC Mayor's Technology and Innovation Inclusion Council. I'm also joined by Dr. Eduardo Padron, who is probably familiar to many of you. He is very recently the president emeritus at Miami-Dade College just this month. He has served as president since 1995. And he just transitioned into a new role there as emeritus. But he actually started as a member of the faculty 50 years ago, which is really extraordinary to me. You must have been a very young toddler at that time. Yeah, thank you. And so Miami-Dade is interesting. It's the largest institution of higher education in America with more than 165,000 students from 192 different countries. Dr. Padron is a recognized leader in this field of post-secondary education, and in 2016, President Obama awarded him the Presidential Medal of Freedom, which is the highest civilian honor in the US for being a prominent national voice for access and inclusion. And I think the reason why is I was looking up some of the news articles around your retirement, and he said, "I have witnessed countless lives being positively transformed in my career by the power of education." So that's why I'm so glad you're here. And finally, we have Wilbert Ferdinand Jr., who is recently retired from ExxonMobil after a 30-year career risk management advisor at the Baton Rouge refinery. And what's so interesting about Wilbert, in addition to being a fantastic and innovative engineer, is that he served in many roles that are focused specifically on recruitment and development opportunities for underrepresented students in STEM. He served as the team captain for ExxonMobil's Southern University Engineering Recruiting Team. He's coordinated field trips for K-12 students to expose them to awesome careers in STEM. And he's a member of Southern University's Business and Industry Cluster, where he's conducting skills workshops and giving real-world advice to aspiring engineers and others. And he's a longtime proponent and partner of NSF and a reviewer for several NSF application or grant programs. So I'm just thrilled that these three gentlemen are here to join me to talk about the future of work. Let's jump in. I'm going to start with you, Ken. I know that so much of this data that we've talked about and just our own experience tells us that the future is actually, it's here. That's the secret. It's here. It's right here. It's in our backyard. Amazon Web Services has had a long presence here in the Northern Virginia community and in other communities nationwide, and Amazon HQ too. There's a lot of excitement about it opening across the way. Clearly, you're living the future of work. Tell us a little bit about some of what you see as some of the trends, the challenges, the opportunities, and some of what you've been doing with AWS to really help us close that gap.
Great. Thank you, and thank you all for being here. It is a huge crowd. I just flew in from a night flight from San Francisco. We had a launch event, so if I slur my words, I apologize. I'll end with a couple things about the future of work and some of the things that I see. But take you back a little bit on a story of AWS. So AWS started, or Amazon Web Services, started in about 2006, where we released this on-demand access to IT resources via the internet with pay-as-you-go pricing. It created this huge change in the way we looked at technology. software development, compute, storage, database, and then the whole suite of services that laid on top of it, machine learning, IoT, robotics, all of a sudden became accessible, like that. You opened a browser and it was there. It was like a utility, like electricity used to be. What that did is that changed startups first, because what venture capitalists actually wants to pay for you to get a rack of servers. They want to pay actually for your brains, for your ability to move quickly. And that agility led to changes in the way venture capitalists were funding. Then it penetrated the enterprise, so on and so forth. And now there's millions of active customers every month using AWS. This led to AWS being the fastest IT vendor to ever hit a $10 billion yearly run rate. It is now a $33 billion yearly run rate just a few years later, and still growing at a startup-like clip of 37% year over year. This is leading to a gigantic and unprecedented job opportunity, the fourth industrial revolution. Cloud computing has been the #1 LinkedIn skill for the past 4 years in a row. Wow. You mentioned 37 jobs. We identified the 28 most in-demand jobs in the cloud. We looked at them as in the software development. That also includes the born-in-the-cloud stuff like DevOps, the cloud architecture world, the data world. And data is changing at such a dramatic rate. This is for a slew of reasons. Data is cheaper. All these services could be laid on top of it. Machine learning is being democratized and so on. But there's a range of jobs in data scientists, machine learning, AI, business intelligence, and those things are more accessible. You don't have to be a PhD to get them all. And then lastly, these operational roles, which are largely middle skill. Cloud support engineer, even cybersecurity, which can begin at a middle skill opportunity and walk all the way into PhD. AI became #2 in the LinkedIn list in the past year. And AWS certifications, to your point, these are really good paying opportunities. So what's the problem? Glassdoor ran a study of companies over their platform between the years 2009 and 2015 and found that the time to hire increased by 80%. Just think about that from a corporate perspective, a near doubling in the time to hire. Think about all those extra costs in the system. Most importantly, for companies like us that depend on innovation to grow, if we don't have innovators and builders, entrepreneurs inside the company, how can we do that? The other side of it is a Gallup study that showed 11% of business leaders think that education is truly preparing them for the job. 11%. There is a 11%. Giant disconnect. AWS Educate was launched to address that. It provides a bunch of free resources, purely grant-driven organization for students, educators in the institution, professional development, curricular resources, free access to AWS, because by the way, kids need hands-on stuff. We don't take purely theoretical people into AWS. We need practitioners. Actually, we sometimes send them back to get that hands-on experience, whether it's to school or to another company in order, how inefficient is that? And it started with 65% inside the US, it's actually flipped. We're more than 65% outside the US right now, and we're getting countrywide opportunities, Singapore and Indonesia, big stuff going on in India. But there's great stuff going on in the US, and here it's statewide and citywide. We started in Los Angeles. We worked on this thing called the LA High Tech Coalition, which was a consortium of 8 LA area community colleges and Los Angeles Unified School District on pathways from grades 9 through 14, and they received California Career Pathway Trust money. It's now the Strong Workforce Program. Great stuff, focusing in on pathways in technology. The success of a program, everything going good against grant, but we tend to like to think a little big at Amazon. So we talked with Santa Monica College and Roosevelt High School, and they said, we'll go quick. And so they developed a 4 to 5 course curriculum that they launched that fall. They sold out the first cohort in a day. They launched the second cohort. It filled up in a day or two. The success of that cohort was so strong that 18 more colleges and sister high schools joined to form the California Cloud Workforce Project. Over 2,000 students are already registered in that in the 5 schools after basically a year. That I came back, Bay Area just launched something last night. That's why I was in California. Miami-Dade, and thanks to the leadership of Dr. Padron, launched a cloud academy around this and a cloud degree program. Columbus State, Northern Virginia Community College, right in our backyard, launched the first associate's degree in the cloud with us. And that was followed by George Mason, which has this awesome advanced partnership with Nova to create pathways. And they also both have relationships with K-12. We got the states. New York and their CUNY and SUNY system said they would be implementing this cloud degree initiative across the state. And Louisiana not only did for the Louisiana Community Technical College system, but they did for K-12 and the University of Louisiana system. So what do I see as the future of work? Well, one, there's got to be a new model where education is playing directly into business. And it's not just we take your grads, you prepare them, we take them. We've got to be down on the ground floor, giving skin in the game, marching people to what the learning objectives are, those KSAs. We've got to be providing professional development, instructional design support, access to our sandbox inside inside their classes and outside, both for internship, but also hands-on experience and so on. Secondly, the future of work needs to be about pathways. If we're really going to change things, it's got to be given from K-12 through 2-year into 4-year and into graduate school. We got to think about pathways. Then number 3, I would say it's got to be about lifelong learning. We all say that, but to be honest, it's just not true. We end stuff in terminal exams and terminal degrees and terminal end to education. It's nonsense. There should be a seamless path in and out, and community colleges play an awesome role, not just on the pathway going up, but the pathway to reskill and upskill. And then lastly, the future of work also demands new competencies. I do hear about soft skills. They're not soft skills. I don't know if they're power skills. I know exactly what they are, but they're also not purely defined. We need people who can deal with ambiguity. We need people who can think big, who move fast, people who can invent and simplify, who are okay with failure and can move on. So I think we've got to also pay attention to that as we look at the future of work.
Love it, Ken. Thank you. I'm also a little bit called out on my own need to continue lifelong learning and not just be satisfied with terminal degrees and these pathways. And so a couple of themes that came up there around the importance of integration and cross-sector integration. It's so popular to talk, we got to partner across sectors. What does it actually mean? It means that students they're learning meaningful skills that translate to meaningful work, that industry is an active partner. And that's something, and I think an ethos that Dr. Padron has had for many years at Miami-Dade, for about 50 years. And he, in his transition, is really thinking about what he's built and this legacy of accomplishment, but also about why you've been so passionate from the beginning about preparing students for opportunities like with Amazon and with all the other companies over that time. So talk a bit about, what the future of work has meant for you over that time, how you've continued, to prepare students to be ready and be successful and take advantage of these opportunities.
Okay, Erin, allow me first to commend the people here today, even though I cannot see you because we are blinded by the lights. I know you are there, but you are the converts, you are the doers. And we just hope that the good work that you do every day can be replicated nationwide, because that's what we did. We have too many boutique projects and so forth and so on, but we seldom bring them to scale, and that's what the nation needs. We need to start with a recognition that no man is an island. No one person can do anything significant. It requires a team. It requires a village. And I think that's the secret of what we've been able to do, a group of people that are totally committed to the idea of a student success and really giving every student, regardless of where they come from, the opportunity to really succeed. And perhaps for me as a leader, my own experience was a determining factor in my passion for this work, because I'm someone who came to this country at age 16 as a refugee with a brother younger than me 3 years, which immediately turned me into a father. And no money, no English, no knowledge of the culture, and only one shirt that I had to wash every night in order to be able to wear the next day. So that was very challenging and all that, but that experience for me has served me well in understanding and identifying with the students that I serve, because they are not different in many ways. Their experience is very similar to mine. And that, I think, has allowed us to build a culture of success at the institution, which is an open door institution, which means that if you have a high school diploma, you are entitled to come and forge a future. And it's a very different, from what we know as a typical university, but one that we have been able to implement with tremendous success. And it's one that really is founded on the notion that access and success can go hand in hand. And the understanding that talent is universal. What's not universal is opportunity. And we feel that we have an obligation to harness the full potential on every student. And for us, what we tell the student is that failure is no option, not an option for them. And that, while it's difficult and the work is never done, because another thing that you need to be very much aware of, and we are, is that poverty matters. And most of the students coming to us are either low income or live in poverty. To give you an example, yes, we're a very large institution, but frankly, 66% of our students are low income, and 43% of them live in poverty by federal standards. So with that, they bring all the things that you all know and we are all confronting, which is most of them are first-generation college students. Most of them cannot afford to come full-time because they have to work to support themselves and their families. They don't have parents that the most part can support their education. So you have to have affordability, you have to have accessibility. These are students who, many of them, English is not their first language, so they have to struggle through learning the language at the same time. They are acquiring the rest of the knowledge. And a lot of, they have a lot of challenges that they have to deal with. And unless you have a support system that allows them to flourish and have understanding and know that they can succeed, because frankly, when I came in, the only thing I brought with me was a promise I made to my mother that regardless of what happens, that I would go to college. Because my mother, even though was a lady that only completed third grade education, was the brightest person you'll ever meet. And I made that promise. And at times, I didn't know how I was going to fulfill that promise. So I went to college understanding that that was the way to achieving the American dream. And many of these students that we get today, many of them have the same problem that I had. I needed self-confidence, I needed self-esteem. We needed people who understood their trajectory and their journey, and to be able to provide the support that they needed. Many of our students today suffer from food insecurity, suffer from lack of child care for their children, lack of reliable transportation, and so many other things. But you know what? They have the most important thing, and that is grit. And I think if you ask me what is the most important factor in succeeding, is grit. It's not only what we need at the college, but it's what you need. I talk a lot to heads of various corporations, and they always tell me, preparation is important, all these things are important, but someone with grit will get to the top. And so that's what we need to try to inspire in these students. It's not an easy job, because most of the institutions that are serving minority students, by the way, we're about 88% minority students, and yet we've been able to achieve incredible success in terms of graduation rates, in terms of retention rates, in terms of job placement, and I could go on and on and on and on. We have won every single prize nationally for that, and we take a great deal of pride, and that's the sort of the vitamin, like of what the students need to know, that yes, they can succeed, and they see the role models of former students who now are leaders of industry and leaders in government and in many other fields. And the final answer to your question is it takes a lot of perseverance and determination, and dealing with a situation where underfunding is really making it very difficult for this institution to succeed. Because as long as government sees education as an expense and not as an investment, we have a problem. And many times these institutions are taken for granted and not enough support is provided. These institutions need 3, 4, 5 times more support than the institutions that are not serving this type of students because of the special needs of the students. But government doesn't make the differentiation most of the time. And we have to struggle, we have to. And I have to say, and I'm glad you're here, because one of the things that have been the solution to many of our problems is the ability to create partnerships at all levels. At all levels with all kinds of organizations, but especially with industry, with business. And I can tell you with no equivocation, in the last 10 years alone, if we had not had the opportunity to partner with companies like Amazon, Facebook, Google, Viacom, Pixar, Tesla, and so forth, we would have not been able to do many of the incredible things that are happening at that institution, such as the Cloud Computing Academy, which is having tremendous success. We cannot keep up with the demand and putting students out. And by the way, most of these are students who come from low-income backgrounds, students who come from ethnic minority groups. The same with data analytics, the same with cybersecurity, the same with robotics engineering. All these programs that we have been providing the students that otherwise they would have never access to it. So, and of course, many of these students finish with us and go to work because most of our degrees have been built on what we call stackable credentials, which they get certification, they get credentials as they move on. So they don't have to wait until the bachelor's to start getting a job in the field that they are studying. And very successfully they do that, and they can build stackable credentials to do it. But frankly, there are so many other things that the students get out of these internships. They get speakers, we get curriculum that is up to date. We get equipment that is what they are gonna be using in industry when they move into. And, but many of them transfer. And actually about 75% of our students are students who are in the transfer track. And these students go everywhere. We have them from state colleges and universities all the way to Princeton, Harvard, MIT, Georgia Tech, Georgetown, everywhere. And you know what? In most of these places, and we get the reports, they perform at the same or higher level of very often than the average, the native university students who started with high GPAs, high SATs, and families with the ability to pay. And what I'm trying to say here is that it's not a mystery as to what needs to happen in order to help the students. And my worry is, frankly, that we don't seem to get the recognition. When you look at the demographics of this nation, when you look at the age distribution of America today, we're aging very fast. We're getting into the same problem as Japan and Europe. And you look at the demographics, if we don't do something drastic, and we're already late, to change the dynamics of how we support the student bodies to be able to join the mainstream of American life and being able to get into high-wage jobs, the future of this country in keeping its leadership position in the world is at risk, at big risk. And I really feel that that is something that we need to all recognize, because it's not about doing something nice for people, it's about all of our future that is involved here. It's the only way, because right now in America you have about almost 7 million jobs. 7 million jobs that are begging for qualified people. And we're not producing them. There is something wrong, something very, very wrong. So a lot of things have to change, but as long as I always say, 50% of solving a problem is recognizing the problem.
Absolutely.
The other 50% is walking the talk.
Yeah, just
Please,
to,
yeah, go ahead.
really quick, I just
That was wonderful, Dr. Brown. Thank you. Yeah, thank you for that call to action.
President Padron is part of that new generation of educational leaders who not only thinks absolutely student-centered, but he also moves quick. because of the urgency, and we need to be, targeting our investment at these places where, people like President Padron exist. Yeah, I commend them. The work that's been done there has been fantastic. It's been at scale and it's been fast.
Oh, I appreciate that. And I think, this theme of some of it isn't a mystery. Some of the solution isn't a mystery. As much as we appreciate NSF grants to do research and to uncover new sources of innovation, we also know that some things work. And I think that's some of what came out in my conversation with Wilbert around the work that he's done, that Exxon's done at Southern University. And some things have changed in the time you've been working with students there. Some things have really changed. I don't know if anyone uses a fax machine anymore. But what it takes to be successful, some of these traits, I don't know if they have. So talk a little bit more about what you've seen change in the need for success and what's kind of been the same.
Great. Let me also commend all of you for being here today. This is a large crowd. And but the work you do is very, very important. And you should be commended on that. I'm very happy to be here to participate in this panel discussion also. As Aaron mentioned, I've spent over 20 years working with Southern University's Business and Industry Cluster. And I've seen a lot change within academia and within the industry side. And I was mentioning to Aaron, when I graduated in 1985, if you had a pager, a fax machine, and a what we call the IBM workstation, you were on the top of technology. Although you were using DOS, when I graduated, Windows hadn't even been developed yet. But now, I can take this device right here, and it's more powerful than the workstation I had. If I need to fax somebody, I can take a picture of it and send it to them. If I need to talk to somebody, they don't have to page me, I just call them, right? So the one thing that we heard Ken saying in his initial comments was change. He kept mentioning the word change and how some of the work they've done changed how people worked and made it more efficient. And so what I was telling Aaron was, the one thing I know about the future of work is that it will change. Okay, and that's about all I can tell you. How it's going to change, I can't tell you that, but we know what requirements today's technology has on us. And, as industry, as academia, the one thing I've seen through my work with the Business and Industry Cluster is I've seen Southern, we've got a cluster of different industries. I'm from the petrochemical industry or the energy industry. Then we'll have somebody from technology. We'll have somebody from the defense industry, somebody from the automotive industry. And we all have our own special needs. And you have to be careful when you're working with industry that we don't pull you in a bunch of different directions where your programs are not effective, no longer effective, because you don't have the resources. Technology is going to change consistently. And if you're trying to keep up with everything that's happening in technology, you need unlimited resources in order to do that. So you need to be committed to your strategic plans and what it is you're doing. So while technology is doing all that changing, there are some things that Ken mentioned and Dr. Padron that I think don't change in order for students to be successful. They need to be fundamentally sound in whatever STEM major they're matriculating in. That's the first thing. Ohm's law, I'm an electrical engineer, Ohm's law hadn't changed since I was there, okay? So, some things stay the same. They need to have good problem-solving skills, and I think Ken alluded to that. They need to be able to take a problem with very little information and be able to go out and solve it, okay? So critical thinking is important. Communication is always an important one. But there's another one that I like to throw in based on my experience, and it's they need to have some kind of entrepreneurial spirit or exposure to to business. A lot of engineers that I've been working with, young engineers, when you ask them about their work and how it contributes to the bottom line, they don't have a clue. You know, they like the new and exciting, flashy stuff, but you know, at the end of the day, when you're working for industry, when you're working within industry, it's about that bottom line. And so, you know, exposure to that is also important. I mentioned that, you know, you don't have the resources to keep up with the changes in industry, but I think exposure is important. And you can use your business and industry clusters or your other industry partnerships to help expose your students to the changes in industry. And I participated on several NSF workshops on grant writing and to talk about industry partnerships. And one of the things I tell some of the institutions that are located in areas where you really don't have a lot of industry or high-tech industry, with today's technology, you can reach out and touch people all over the world. And so you have to reach out and establish relationships with industries that might interest your students or that's consistent with your program, and you know, develop those relationships and use today's technology to actually bring someone from other parts of the country or other parts of the world into your classroom or make them available to your students.
I think that's a fantastic reminder for all of us about what sorts of fundamentals remain and how to continue to equip and support students in learning those fundamentals, practicing those fundamentals, being exposed to different kinds of ways to practice those fundamentals with business over time while our pagers are in the recycling bin. And you know, thinking a little bit about and circling back this question around the success of low-income, first-gen students, traditionally underrepresented groups, you know, that's really the focus of the STEM program and really the work of these three gentlemen. And when I hear a lot of Fortune 100 companies that say, gosh, we really need to diversify our STEM workforce. And then I'll speak with post-secondary institutions. We're really trying to diversify our programming. I talk to K-12 educators who are saying, I'm really trying to close the achievement gap. And we know that all these things are related. We know that there are some bright spots in terms of success of these students. We heard about some of them from Miami-Dade. So I'm curious from all of you, kind of your thoughts on this question of, I'll start with you, Ken, the business imperative is there, the socioeconomic or the social imperative is there. How can we sort of be energized and focused on those imperatives to improve, you know, recruitment, retention of low-income and minority students, and how have you really been focusing on that with AWS?
Yeah, absolutely. So, navel gazing, the tech industry needs to diversify. Amazon needs to diversify as a constant and organic challenge, because one of our top principles is being customer obsessed. If you aren't, you know, as your customer, if you don't have that close touch to your customer, how can you understand that customer population? The second thing is it's just a pipeline need. You know, we need to widen the pipeline. There are lots of tech jobs available. I think the Wall Street Journal came out with an article recently about how finally we're now in a glut of jobs at the skill level. We just don't have people who can perform them. Our work with community colleges has really been central to this, and there's a couple reasons. Like my friend over here, they move fast. They're willing to move fast when they've got, you know, a leader of that ilk. They align well with industry. They can go system-wide. They have a hugely diverse base. But the other thing that's really important, and this is sort of our Trojan horse into education, is they have these awesome dual enrollment, early college relationships with K-12. They have transfer and matriculation into four-year. You know, Dr. Patrone was talking about that. I mean, I was at Cal State Northridge The Cal State system, I believe 53% of Cal State students come from community college, 29% of UC students come from Cal State community colleges, and there was some huge number of STEM. And President Padron is right. They have grit. They matriculate. The graduation rates of people who transfer in from community colleges is much higher than people starting in. So this has been one agent for change, because I will tell you, K-12 change is real slow. I think we have to be honest about pieces around that. Four-year institutions tend to change slower. There is movement, there is change. CTE programs can help make change. Dual enrollment, early college can make change, and they are really important programs because people need pathways into that next level. We can't leave them off and say high school's it. We can't leave them off and say middle school is here and now we're going to completely change the game in high school. We need to make pathways and clear roles for people to grow. Hands-on stuff matters. Robotics, knowing they'll get a job at the end. We introduced something called the Interview Accelerator. We have a job board of Amazon customer and partner jobs. It's not when they graduate high school, but when they come through 2- and 4-year degree programs. And eventually, it's just purely competency, skill-based. We are moving towards competency-based efforts. But when they see a job at the end, this Interview Accelerator says, if you do X, we're going to guarantee you an interview. People want jobs. They want careers. They want placement. They need hands-on stuff. And I think that's I've seen FIRST Robotics do amazing stuff with persons of diversity as well as, with women. I just think it can change the game. In Los Angeles, our stuff was majority minority Hispanic. In Louisiana, Grambling is a big member of the work, and there's obviously this focus on rural. Nova, obviously the work with Miami-Dade, so on. It really does hit this this diverse population.
So part of building these pathways is also partnering with folks who have tremendous reach and success in working with diverse communities. And I think that sort of reminds me of something else Wilbert and I talked about, which is around this idea of how you catch students early, how you catch students on the bubble, and how you think about valuing the expertise, the grit that all students have. Could you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I think if we're going to move the needle on the number of STEM majors we have, we're going to have to value those students that don't have the 4.0 GPAs. and we have to start early. We talked about K through 12, but I heard you mention confidence. And if a student comes out of K through 12 and they don't have the 3.0 or better, just imagine what we have done to that kid, as far as their confidence, right? And Sarah did a good job of explaining some of the challenges students in college and universities have. But, these students in K through 12 face some of the same challenges. And if they've gone through that K through 12 period not doing very well academically because of those challenges, and we've not challenged them, we've kind of basically lowered their self-esteem, then it's going to be difficult. But, that's where I think we need to reach. We need to reach those students that have the potential to do well. And let me just mention something. When I was interviewing at Southern and interviewing students, one of the things I would always ask them is, you don't have a 4.0, why? and I also did that when we had classroom visitations. During the classroom visitations, you would really see students they'll start sitting up when we got to talking about grades, because they all want to do well. They're there, they want to do well. They just have challenges. And what I would tell them is, it's important when you're interviewing with me, especially, or anybody, if you don't have a 4.0, I need to know why. Is it because you worked through college? That's something that's to your advantage. Whatever reason it is, you need to be able to explain that. If you're part of an extracurricular program, what did you do? Were you just a member, or did you do some things to help improve the college? Tell me about it. I want to know about it. But we need to focus on those kids, and we need to recognize the value in their experiences. And I share with you that one of my biggest accomplishments at ExxonMobil, I'll try to do this quickly, was related to something I learned when my parents were building their home. I was in 7th grade, and my dad decided to sub everything out himself. He wasn't a contractor, though, but I was the laborer. And I was working with the plumber. Now, this plumber, mind you, I don't even think he had a college education, but he had been doing this work for quite a long time. And one of my biggest accomplishments with ExxonMobil was I used something he taught me to solve a problem that the company had been trying to solve with a reactor for over 30 years. And so my point being is that these kids come with different experiences. And we need to value those experiences because, and build on those experiences, because that's what makes them different. And that's what's going to help take us, that ingenuity is what's going to help take us to the next level.
I absolutely love that story, recognizing the value of those experiences and then solving a problem 30 years later. I think we can go to questions now for the audience. We have about 10 minutes or so. There are microphones. I can, again, sort of see them in the middle of the room. So if you have a question for one of our panelists, please feel free to ask. As always, prefer a question with a question mark to a statement with a period. And then if there's someone specific you'd like to answer your question, please direct it to them. Otherwise, we'll pass them out along the panel. So anyone have questions? Otherwise, I have about 15 more. So, I see one gentleman. I see some folks who are getting to the mics. We'll give you a minute to get to the microphone. There's so many of you. All right, we will start right there.
Me?
Please.
Thank you very much for the panel. This was super interesting for us in rural parts of the country. The things that Ken say, and well, everyone, but it resonated with me that integration in between the industry and the big companies and the schools, and how you have to be down on the ground. I was thinking, what is the incentive for a big company to come to those rural schools? And I understand what Ferdinand William say about making partnerships with industries and see which ones are related to your areas. And partnerships are good, but it was this down on the ground, training those students in place, maybe, that I didn't know what is the incentive for a big company to come to small areas and be down on the ground. I mean, Amazon was looking for a hub, and of course it went to places where they have big universities and of course that would make sense. And so, what is the place for those smaller universities and more rural areas?
Yeah.
And from the point of view of the teachers, we will like to train those students for the industry, but we are not cross-trained ourselves. And I think those changes have to come from the institutional level. I mean, how we train to be teachers or researchers, but not to be industry partners. And the industry doesn't train their people to be teachers. So how do we do that?
It's that fundamental crossover question. So I think there are two great questions in there. Ken, if you can take the first around what sort of incentivizes companies, yours or others that you've interacted with, to go into these regions, perhaps others that are smaller regions or rural, or et cetera?
Yeah, I think there's a constant question of scale and reach. So one thing that we've done is going statewide, and community college systems often reach to, in Louisiana, the work that goes there goes statewide, which also hits, you know, rural parts of Louisiana. And then the connections that they have to those K-12s, as well as transfer within to various University of Louisiana systems. That's a model that when there's common or shared curriculum, fluid transfer agreements, access, AWS is an internet-driven resource, so you get it by typing. You do need broadband access, and I know, you know, in some places that becomes a limitation, but the tools are available when we do those statewide things. So that's one way we do it. The other part is AWS Educate, you know, is meant to be online so that it can reach to those areas, and it has free content on it and professional development, and you can see how that maps to competencies and micro-credentials and this and that in order to do self-serve. It's not the easiest challenge to go partner on the ground with those schools, but the way that we're doing that is via statewide.
Thank you for that, Ken. And I think the second part of the question is sort of around this idea of the translation between I'm a teacher, but I'm also educating people for industry that maybe I haven't even had any exposure to. And Dr. Padron, I know you started your career as a professor. You have spent a lot of time leading an institution that has these connections with industry. How do you sort of bridge that gap, or how do you sort of move in those two roles between I'm a teacher, I'm teaching fundamentals of physics or laws of the universe, and I'm also, you know, thinking about bringing in this business partnership?
Well, you have to really, if you are committed to this, you have to provide a very robust system of professional development for faculty. Because I really feel that you can expect faculty to do it on their own. You have to provide the resources and the opportunities and the contacts and so forth for them to do it. And that's how you do it. You know, we today, unfortunately, we put a lot of emphasis on the student side of the house and all the pathways and all these things, but we really don't talk much about pedagogy. We don't talk much about the teaching aspect. And frankly, we need to do that because students today, the pedagogy that is required in order to really reach them has totally changed. At Miami-Dade College, we have gone almost full force into project-based learning.
Wow.
And it's incredible what that has done in terms of retention, in terms of student engagement, because a student who's engaged in the learning process is a student who completes. No question about that, and we see it. But you cannot expect faculty to do it by themselves. You need to provide the opportunities. So a lot of training, a lot of opportunities. And what I have seen is that faculty really welcome that because every conscientious faculty member wants their students to succeed. And that's the motivation for them to do this.
That's right.
And on the other hand, with the industry, you have to hustle. You have to knock at their door. You have to insist. You cannot sit down and expect AWS to come back and talk to you about this. You have to call Ken, you have to call whoever you know there and say, hey, we have this need, can we talk? And make sure that, you know, it takes that. The same way with the K-12 system, as well as students transferring to the university. You need to reach these understandings and the fact that we're all in the same boat and we all have to work together. You cannot say, well, it's the fault of the high school teacher who didn't prepare them well.
That's right.
You have to faculty conversation so the curriculum is aligned and so many other things that are so essential to the success of the students. That must be centered to the discussion.
That's a great
Let
answer.
me just add one quick thing. And the other thing, it doesn't have to be a Fortune 500 company that you establish your relationships with. It could be any industry within your area that it's that professional environment that you want to expose your students to. I think it's very important.
That's a great point.
Okay, we only have time for like 2 or 3 more questions, so we'll go here next and then back over here. And then we have a break at 11:15, so if you have a burning question, you can speak with the panelists after that.
Okay, so can I ask my question?
Yeah.
Okay.
Go for it.
Okay, well, first of all, thank you so much to the panel for this discussion. It's really inspiring, actually, for me, for the first time, to hear about the future of work and how it relates to education. I myself have been through change through my life, all the way from Peru when I came to the US. And my question is, I work at Penn State, and it's a big university, and I've been trying to make changes with undergraduate education. And I see that there is a generation problem to make changes at the institution. I don't mean to be rude to older people, but older people don't want to change. In addition to that, and I agree fully with all the problems the students have, and Sarah gave an amazing talk yesterday that relates to that as well. But at the university, we have people who go through the promotion and tenure process. Faculty go through that, and there is pressure to do research, to publish. And education, yes, you have to do that on top of everything, but we don't value that as much as we should. So I heard that there is a disconnect of 11% between what we teach and company needs. And I've been trying to say that at the university. Do you have tips or do you have a message that I could use to change that?
A message that will get, as you mentioned, these institutions are made of human beings, and human beings can be part of the change, or the big block in the middle saying, I'm not moving, so one or the other. Any advice actually from any of the panelists about how you sort of approach, equipping the leaders in institutions and the individual faculty members to sort of embrace some of these changes and to be flexible and to be student-centric?
I think real change has to come from the bottom up. These kind of things you cannot mandate from the top. And the way to do that is empowering, especially the faculty, to have the opportunity to bring about change without fear. And also looking at the rewards of the system. Because he's right. If you are expected to move up and rank by research and publications, et cetera, that's what you're going to do. But if you open that up and provide different avenues to get advancement in the institution, that's a totally different story. And the other thing is, and I go back to this because I think it's really essential in the success of the students in the classroom. Because even after you give them access and you bring them into the classroom, if what happens in the classroom is not appealing, is not convincing, those students are going to drop out. And there is a large dropout rate, especially in science. And I'll tell you my case. I got a PhD in economics thinking that I was going to go and work for industry. Then I realized that my calling was in teaching. But I had a degree, but I didn't know how to teach. And I was thrown into the classroom, was given a textbook, and started teaching. And I thought I was a great teacher, but I'm not sure I was. And the fact of the matter is that it's true for most of professors who never had any instruction in pedagogy, but are good people in their expertise. We need to provide faculty, and I would have appreciated when I started and made significant mistakes, some kind of training opportunity, professional development to know how to be a good teacher, how to relate to the students. What's the best way to do this and the best way to do that? That's an art and a science at the same time.
That's right.
And most institutions do not do that. And that's a big, big mistake, especially now in this era when the students really do not have the patience for what I went through, which was a faculty member with a piece of chalk in the classroom giving a 50 minutes lecture. Something today you can get right with your phone, more updated than what the faculty member has in 1 second. You need to make sure that the students can apply knowledge to solving problems of society today. Right. And that's a great combination of faculty, students working together.
I love that answer, Dr. Pedro. Sorry. We have so much excitement up here. Ken, Wilbert, and then Ken.
Mention though, but if you have a strong relationship with industry may be able to help nudge your university into a particular direction if there's a true need there that's resulting in a deficiency in the students who are graduating.
The last thing I'd say, I absolutely agree with the bottoms down, but for all of you, leaders of institutions, it actually is a top-down thing too. And the reason, if you don't provide the space for faculty to do X, if you don't align rewards and incentives, if you don't give them access to professional development, and you don't say we're going to go here, you won't be able to do it at scale. So I get that, but I think that top-down thing is also important. And then the last thing I'd say is that research and education thing is, I'm not going to answer that at all, but it is important.
I'm a benevolent dictator.
I will, on behalf of the thousands of students whose lives you've touched, Dr. Padron, I will just say I'm sure they'll forgive you for your early mistakes in economic professorship.
So if we'll just have you here next, and then here, and then just please ask your question very briefly, and then follow up after the plenary. So we'll go here, and then here next, very briefly, in one response.
Yes,
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you for a great panel. So my question is, how do we as institutions balance the comment you made about not trying to keep up with every single advance in technology, while also trying to improve our ability to be responsive to the rapidly changing needs in the workforce, particularly in our dual enrollment programs and our relationships with our community college partners?
Who wants to take that?
I'll try.
You'll try? Great.
I think you have to do it very carefully. I mean, well, I mentioned earlier that I think exposure is more important than developing a whole curriculum around something. You know, in the two-year institutions, you may be able to create certificates or what have you that students can get online or something like that through working with a partnership with industry. But I just don't think, at least my experience tells me, that you can't change a curriculum overnight. But you can expose students to what changes are occurring. If you've got alumni or working in a particular area, they can come in and present 30 minutes to an hour on a particular subject. But you know, you don't have to change the whole curriculum. I guess that's what
I'd probably go with the countervailing view on that. So I absolutely agree with the hands-on stuff, but curriculum is dated. You know, we are not teaching kids the math skills that they need to get into data science. We are not teaching them about non-relational, big and streaming data. And there are base, I think you mentioned this before, like computational thinking and data and statistics are base stuff, and they will not change, just as pieces around electrical engineering that I'm not going to go into. The way we've done that is through shareable collaborative curricula mapped to a competency map, and when pieces change, then modularly pieces of curriculum can change. There is a way to do that at scale, and there's a way to do that very, very quickly. As long as there is, it maps to your local standards, or you're able to do things cool today. I totally agree with the hands-on, that hands-on piece without a doubt. But I do think the focus on shareable, open, growing, organic curriculum that offers pathways to credentialing, micro-credentials, stackable, XYZ, is really important.
Okay, and last brief question.
Right. So for the gentleman from ExxonMobil, you mentioned the importance of responding to the changes that are occurring. How should colleges and universities be preparing students to be responding to the global climate emergency?
The global climate emergency. Unfortunately, that wasn't an area of my expertise. But I think we all, as citizens of this world, and especially this country, should be concerned about the environment. And that's something you take with you, right? You shouldn't lose it at the gate, which is a common language we use. You don't leave something at the gate. You bring it in with you, okay? And so you should apply that to the work that you do. And I think, just to build on your question and try to do it quickly, I think when we talk about the types of students that we're concerned about right now, the one thing I thought about was these are going to be some of the most ethical employees you're going to hire because they know, they have an appreciation for the job that they have. They may be the first one in their community that's doing this, in their family, I'm sorry, that's doing this. They appreciate the salary that they're making and the opportunities that they're given, and they're going to make this. They're not going to jeopardize their future by making the wrong decisions or what have you. So my experience tells me that these are very ethical. They become very ethical employees. But the direct answer to your question is, I think you just have to keep these students abreast of what's going on, and then let the science and the technology speak for itself, and that they'll make their own decisions. They'll find their way. I don't think it's something you can teach or prepare them for. It's like marriage, I think. Excuse me.
Thank you.
That's just one man's opinion.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, Wilbert. And I think, part of what we've been talking about is equipping all students, not just 4.0 students, not just students from some communities or some incomes, to face the future of work and the challenges that we face, whether they're environmental challenges, whether they're human challenges, where it's the challenge of dealing with the poverty that so many students face today. And that's really, I think, the beauty of these types of programs, is preparing students to wrestle with those challenges. So tremendous thank you to these three gentlemen.
Let's give the panelists a hand.
This is
Thank
great.
you.